Oh, Walker, you need to go back to bed after this.
All right. Welcome to the second live event that we're doing today. We've had a little bit of technical difficulties, but we're glad you're with us. Today we're going to talk about Sue. Sue is someone who came to our website and submitted a request to have a free credit check where we could review her credit score, look at what's going on, and give her advice on what she can do to improve. And Nathan, you took a look at what she had written in there, and I think you even had a chance to talk to her. Tell us a little bit about Sue's situation. What kind of credit score does she have right now?
Absolutely. So I had a chance to talk to her after reviewing her credit questionnaire. And so let me jump in. We don't go for detailed and targeted exact credit scores, but we do ask about your credit score. And she has a credit score below 580. That's the biggest band we have, which says she's really struggling right now. She doesn't have a lot on her credit report except for a couple of negatives. She had a car and it got repossessed. And then she also has a collection out there. It's a small one, less than $500, but she does have those two negative things and nothing really building her credit right now.
And so, talk about that a little bit. So, if she didn't have those negative things on her credit score, what do you think her credit score would be?
Well, if she didn't have those two negative things, so if you wipe off the car payment and the repossession and you wipe out the collection account, then she has no credit score. She has nothing out there that processes. If she had repaid her car loan or was still continuing on it and didn't have that collection, her credit score would probably be in the mid 600s. It's not a thick file, so probably 650, maybe 660, depending on how long she'd been paying on it. I didn't ask that question.
So, let's get into this because, a lot of the advice on the internet is, hey, if you've got damaged credit, the first thing to do is to go see if you can get that damaged stuff removed. And if you can get it removed, then all of a sudden you're magically going to have an improved credit score. But what you're telling me is if she can have those things magically removed, she doesn't actually improve her credit score. It just disappears. And that doesn't actually help her. Why is it that not removing those items is not the first thing to do?
Right. Well, there's a couple of things in there that you said that I want to address. The first of them is there's generally not a way to magically remove stuff. If it's bad and it's missing bad information on your credit report, you can dispute it and get it taken off. If it's accurate, most of the time you're just wasting your time. So I don't really like listening to those things to say, hey, you can automatically improve your credit. Now, if you can get those things removed and you have a lot of credit information on your credit account or your credit report already, then yeah, it is going to boost your credit score. So that's good. But since she doesn't have anything there and she has no good data on her credit report, it's just not really going to do anything but wipe her credit out completely. I do think that's a step she should try to take to address those, but it's not the first step. And I'll give you one quick bullet right here is you have to have good in order to have a good credit score. And so since she doesn't have that, we're going to address that first because that's going to be the more important thing.
So let's talk about that. What does good mean? So I've got a credit score, I've got a credit file, I've successfully avoided negative stuff, but I currently don't have a credit score. What kind of good stuff does Sue need to get on her credit file so that she can start to build her credit?
So we need open credit accounts that have on-time payments. That's the key. I need to show that I'm making a payment on time every month, and it has to have an account that's going. And I really like to say you have to have at least 36 payments on your credit report. There's some bounds to that. If you opened 36 accounts and paid it for 1 month, that's not going to be good enough. But on the other side of it, you don't have to open just one account and wait 36 months either. You can do this with multiple accounts.
So what you're saying is, if I want to establish if I want to establish a history of on-time payments, I need to build up about 36 on-time payments. And that can be done much more quickly if I have 3 credit accounts that I'm making on-time payments to in a year, or I can take one and take 3 years to get that done. But it's not good enough to just have the card, right? I need to actually make a payment. Does that mean I have to be in debt in order to be able to log that on-time payment?
So that's actually a question that didn't come from Sue, but it did come from people. I've heard it all the time. Oh, well, I'm carrying a balance so that I can build my credit on it. And it's like, no, that's the worst thing you want to do because you're paying interest. No, you do have to make a payment every month. Otherwise, the account goes inactive and you risk it getting closed even. and that doesn't build your credit. So you want to show that payment, that it's being paid on time every month. Go out and buy a gallon of milk. Go out and buy just anything that's small that you need every month. Make one purchase on it and then pay that bill in full. Now your credit card is active and it's being used, but you're not building up debt and you're paying that balance in full. So you're not paying interest.
Well, and one of the other added benefits to making sure that you're making only a small payment on that credit card when you're making that payment is you keep your utilization really low. And utilization, we know, has a linear relationship with credit score. So the higher your utilization, the lower your credit score is.
Absolutely. We know that from our study of the 10 million credit files that we had, and we really did a lot of analysis on utilization, push the pieces and parts around. And when it comes down to it, utilization is just super important. My math says 10% change in your utilization typically moves your credit score about 15 points. That's a big change. And so by keeping it down, you can really take advantage of that high value or that low value utilization is really going to push your credit score into the higher range. And that's a great thing.
So obviously that isn't important for Sue right now because she's got no credit files. But if she were to be able to get a credit card or two, one of the reasons why you want to keep a low payment, go to Taco Bell and pay it off and don't use the card for anything else, is because in the future you will have a lower utilization. What you don't want to do is get a secured credit card for $500, max it out every month, and then have a utilization of 90 or 95%, even if you're making an on-time full payment every month and not paying interest.
Absolutely. You need to think about these credit cards not as ways to charge and pay for things you don't have. You need to think about it as a tool to build your credit. That's what it's for. You want to have that good credit score so that when you go out to buy a house, when you go to buy a car, when you do anything else, you're going to get the lowest interest rate possible on those big ticket purchases. Credit cards are just tools. You use them to build your credit. You use them to make simple payments, and you keep that balance really low. And that's what they're the best for.
So we're talking to Sue and we're saying, hey, once you have your finances established, you're not going to be missing payments. You got your budget locked in. You need to go get an account or two. And the best thing to do is credit cards that you don't have to carry a balance on and therefore pay interest. The question is for Sue, who doesn't have much of a credit card, a credit file or a credit history, can she even get a credit card? How is she going to be able to do that practically speaking?
Right. Well, that's a good question. Now, if Sue didn't have any of the negatives and had no credit report, typically there's multiple credit card companies out there that'll actually give you small credit cards without any issues, without any secured card, because you have no file. You're not a major credit risk. She is a credit risk because she has those negatives right now. And so the best way for her to approach this is going to be with a secured credit card. It's going to be something you mentioned earlier. You're going to have to put a little deposit down on it, and that's going to match your credit line. And that keeps you from being a credit risk at all. And it's almost a guaranteed way to get a card. And then as you establish your history, they'll give you that refund back on your deposit. And then you can continue to use the card as a standard credit card.
Yeah, and one of the ways you can find the credit card that works for you is at the Yukon Project. There is a page that will allow you to look at different credit card options and apply for a credit card there. So it's a one-stop shop where you can go and find something that meets your needs.
Absolutely. And we have a secured credit card section on there. And for Sue, I don't know that I would spend any time looking for unsecured rebuilding credit cards. You can apply for them, unlikely to get approved for them until we take the time to rebuild the credit history with a secured card. And we mentioned that a minute ago, but I would also throw in one more thing, which is a credit building loan. It's a special loan that you can get that will help you build your credit.
So tell us a little bit about that, because that sounds like an excuse to go into debt just to pay someone interest. So how does a credit building loan actually work, and how would it work for Sue specifically?
Absolutely. So credit building loans is a special thing. They take it and give you a small dollar loan, usually $500, maybe $1,000. And they actually take that money and instead of giving it to you, they stick it over in a savings account. And then you make a monthly payment against that loan. And when the payments process is over, you have access to the savings account. Now, the reason why I don't like these is one, because they're short term. They don't last forever like a credit card does. And so they don't have as much of an impact on your credit score. They can do a little bit of things. The thing I like about it is they're guaranteed for pretty much everyone. And it actually encourages you to build a little savings. Usually it'll cost between $50 and $150 to get these, depending upon which one you go for. But they're really nice processes. And for somebody who's willing to spend a little bit of money to build their credit and helps them, I think they're a good thing for some people. And in this instance, I would absolutely recommend one.
So what I think is interesting about that is we've been talking about establishing a history of on-time payments and a credit history. A credit building loan can do that for you because you're going to be logging payments that are reported to the credit bureaus. But what exactly happens to your credit report the day you pay that off? You get your savings back. What ends up happening to it? What happens to your credit score?
So on one of those, your credit score is not going to change drastically. It'll actually probably drop a little bit as you pay it off. And that has to do with loan utilization, a couple of other things, open accounts. And so you'll actually see your credit score probably drop a little bit right as it paid off. And I say a little bit, I mean 5 or 10 points. It's not like you're going to drop from 750 down to 520 if you pay that off, but you will see a small dip. But that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Don't worry about small dips in your credit score. Credit scores move and vary over time. I track mine pretty regularly, and month over month, it goes up or down 15 points pretty much every month.
Is there any value for Sue to think about the diversity of the kind of credit she has? In other words, is 2 credit cards not as good as a credit card and a credit building loan?
In her instance, no, I'd say you'd actually be better off with 2 credit cards. But since she has to go with secured cards, that's why I'm going to recommend the credit building loan, because I want to get her credit established enough that she can go out and get some unsecured cards. In the end, what I want her to have is 3 unsecured cards that she's making 1 charge on every month and paying it, because that's going to build that really nice depth. But we have to get her credit good enough to be able to get approved for those unsecured cards.
So give us a quick, just to be very clear, we're talking secured and unsecured cards. A secured card is where you actually give the company $500 and they give you a $500 credit limit. So they're not at risk anything. Your balance is secured by the money you put in. An unsecured card is a card that you just sign up for. They give you a limit, and if you default on that limit, they've got no recourse. And that's why it's a little harder to get that credit card.
Yeah, and that's a good distinction to make. And that's why I say you can almost always get approved for a secured card. There are instances where you might be declined, but in general, you're going to get approved for that if you put that deposit down. And then you use that to build your credit.
So let's get to brass tacks here. If Sue gets everything under control, let's say she gets 2 credit cards, she keeps the utilization on those 2 credit cards low, and she's able to maybe pay off the small collections that she has on her account. And she does that for 6 months or 8 months. What do you think she should be able to see? If her credit score is 550 right now, what kind of growth do you think she could see in 6 months?
Paying off that collection, getting it closed out, and then those 2 credit cards, keeping that utilization, I'd say she's going to add up probably about 100 points. She's going to be in the mid 600s. And the reason why I say probably instead of certainly is because she does still have that repossession out there that has a balance on it. And that's a little bit concerning. To really max out her score, she's going to have to resolve that balance in some way. Now, hopefully she can negotiate it and pay it off in the near future. But removing that piece of the negative is actually more important than the collections here. And so I would focus first on removing that repossession payment that you have out there, making sure that that's paid off and closed out completely. It's going to be negative. It's going to be on your credit report for a few years, but don't worry about it. Once it's paid off, the impact of that will decrease really fast over time. In 2 years, it's going to be like it never even happened.
Yeah, one of the things that I think someone like Sue or anybody else who has what we call a thin file, meaning not very much on their credit report and don't have very many years on it, one of the things that you got to keep in mind is you can build your credit very quickly with that. It's those people that have a long history of credit that has damage all the way through it, and it's what they call a thick file, they have a harder time growing their credit score. So someone like Sue, she cleans things up a little bit. She should be able to see some significant growth fairly quickly, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And I'm going to actually shine a little bit more light there. Even if you've got a thick file with some damage issues, it usually can take a year or less to bring that credit score up. The only thing that really hurts thick files that's not going against you right now is usually a large amount of debt and a high utilization rate. That's what I see that really slows people down. And that's just simply because we don't have $5,000 or $10,000 sitting around to pay those debts off. And so it takes more than a year or 2 years to get that credit score recovered because you don't have 10 grand to pay that debt off. If you paid that debt off, even those thick files would have that improvement in 6 months to a year. I've very seldomly seen a credit score that I didn't think could be up in the 700s from anywhere they are within a year.
And that's really fascinating because what you're essentially saying is the challenge to improving your credit score isn't with the credit bureaus and it isn't with what your score is. It's entirely dependent upon whether or not you can get control of your day-to-day finances and therefore make the on-time payments that you need to, never miss a payment, not be late, and drop that utilization. Those are the things that are going to be the challenges. So too often, a lot of people kind of concentrate on the credit score and the credit file and how can I get things removed, when the real issue is that if you can get your house in order and you can start paying down your debt, you're going to improve your credit fairly quickly.
Absolutely. Those are the two things that are key. Pay all your bills on time every month. Don't worry about any past due payments in the history. That's not that big of a deal, and they dissipate in impact very quickly. It's actually amazing how fast they can go away and be not even important. Even if they're on your credit report, they're just not that important after a year. So just pay those bills and then bring that debt down. And that does two things. One, it improves your credit score. Two, it loosens up your budget so you can do other things.
Yeah, it's funny. Famously, people talk about, bad stuff being on your credit file for 6 years. And what is interesting is you can look at that and feel like you've had a couple of mistakes or you ran into emergencies and you're stuck for 6 years. But the reality is that if you can get back on track, even though that still looks like it's on your credit file, it's probably not affecting you after 18 months or 2 years. It can look like it's there, but you shouldn't really concentrate on it because it's probably not as significant as the stuff that's happened last month or the month before.
Yeah. The last 6 months are the most important. Anything that's more than 2 years old, I pretty much don't pay any attention to it because the credit score pretty much doesn't. Now it uses it, but it doesn't pay that much attention to it. Recency is key. I don't care if you had bad debt 6 years ago. How have you been doing for the last 5 years? You've paid all your bills on time every month. Well, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to continue doing that now. You had a hiccup and you fixed it. And that's what credit scores are really there to do. The last 2 years is important, especially that last 6 months.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. So I think the prognosis is that Sue is in pretty good shape. She just needs to do a couple of things. And if she does those and she stays on track, she should have a really good credit score very soon. And that'll give her a position where she can get the apartment, that she wants to get, or she might even be able to qualify for a new car loan. Especially if she can keep that interest rate low, she's probably in pretty good shape.
Yeah, let's do a quick summary for Sue of the steps that she should take now that we've talked about the details. Step number one, she's already knocked out, which was get your budget in order. I don't think we talked a lot about that today, but that was the first thing I asked her, and it's important. Get your budget in order, make sure you can manage those payments. Step two, get a secured credit card and open a credit building loan. We're going to establish your credit really well. It's going to take about 6 months. In that 6 months, she's also going to focus on paying off that repossession. I'm going to get that whole bill paid off. And if possible, pay off that collection account. If she can't, it's not as big of a deal. I like to get collections settled, but they don't have as big of an impact as you'd think on the credit score improvement, although that repossession will. Once she's established that information, she's got her credit score up in the mid 60s. She's going to go out and get 2 more unsecured credit cards. And now here's the key with every one of those cards. 1 charge a month, pay the balance in full. And she does that in between 12 and 18 months. She's going to have a credit score that anyone's going to be envious of. She's going to be well over 700 and get approved for anything she needs as long as she's got the income to back it up.
That is awesome. All right. Well, Nathan, thank you for today. Thank you for this live event. Anybody out there who would like us to take a look at their credit, go to the Yukon Project website. You'll be able to find the form there and fill it out. We'd love to be able to look at you and give you some advice on what you can do to improve your credit score and maybe even feature you on the channel. Thanks for joining us today.